Dr. White, do we have you online with us as well? Awesome. We're so excited to have you here with us with our other phenomenal panelists this evening. We cannot wait to hear the conversations that you guys are going to lead us in this evening. Okay, well, it is 6:00 p.m. and we want to be respectful of you all's time. First and foremost, thank you for joining us in this very, very important conversation that we're going to be having tonight. So I will say sit back, grab your tea, your coffee, your Pepsi if you're someone like me, or whatever your favorite drink is, as we have this honest conversation about mental health. And we know that the hustle and bustle of how chaotic the world seems, the chaos and confusion, you know, we just need a moment to have that time to connect with others, to be able to understand that sometimes it's okay not to be okay and what we can do when we're not okay. So we have a phenomenal panel of awesome women who will be sharing some of their insights from their day-to-day work in mental health and mental wellness. And so we're super excited about that. And so what I wanted to do as we get started today, thinking about the hustle and bustle and the 50 million things that we always are trying to get done, particularly in a day, I want us to take just 60 seconds just to stop and just to kind of reflect, just to be us. So we're going to take just 60 seconds to just be able to breathe in and breathe out, to try to bring calm, to not think about all the things we have to do tomorrow, but right now in this moment, how we want to feel, what we want to do, what we want to accomplish. Just that calm, that peace, that serenity, and knowing that each and every one of us is worthy. Each and every one of us is more than enough, and that we all are capable and compassionate, and that we are prepared to take care of ourselves as well as our community. Just take a really deep breath in and just exhale it out. Let's do that one more time. Inhale it in and blow it out, knowing that everything is going to be okay, that we are all going to get through this together. So we thank you for joining. And at this time, we're going to our panel, and we have Miss Toni Roberts, who will be introducing our phenomenal women who are leading our panel.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for spending your evening with us speaking about mental health. I am Toni Gordon, and I currently serve as your Georgia Area Coordinator. And first, I will introduce to you Dr. Joyner. Dr. Mildred Joyner has a DPS, MSW, BSW, LCSW, a lot of initials, and she currently serves as the president of the National Association of Social Workers, and that has 55 chapters throughout the United States and its territories. Dr. Joyner also serves as the president of the North American region of the International Federation of Social Workers, which includes Canada and the United States, and members of the IFSW Executive Committee. Professor Joyner received her BSW from Central State University in Wilberforce, Ohio, and her MSW in Planning, Policy, and Administration from Howard University School of Social Work in Washington, D.C. Professor Joyner is married to the Honorable J. Curtis Joyner, who is a senior federal judge in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. Together, they have 3 daughters, Dr. Jennifer Joyner Hall, who serves as a clinical psychologist in Washington, D.C. Their other daughter is Nicole Joyner, who is a human resource director in Atlanta, Georgia, and Jacqueline Joyner, who is an attorney in Washington, D.C. Her greatest role is being Gigi to her 2 grandsons, David Hall IV and Jacob Hall, who are the reasons why she remains committed to the work and the archival racial, social, and economic environment and political justice for all. Please and welcome. Thank you so much for spending your evening with us. Next, we have Robin McLeish. She returned to Brooklyn to receive her master's in social work from Columbia University in New York and moved back to Kissimmee, Florida in 2009. In 2015, she became a licensed clinical social worker and began working as a trauma counselor in Orlando's Arnold Palmer Hospital for Children. In addition to that, in 2009, she has her cognitive behavioral therapist as well as trauma-focused approaches to helping many individuals and families overcome the confinement of their painful past. When she is not doing therapy, she focuses on self-care. This includes spending time with her daughters and being a wife to her wonderful and supportive husband and enjoying time with friends and volunteering her time within the organization of Sigma Rho Sorority Incorporated. Lastly, we have Dr. Adrienne White, who currently serves as a therapist in the Atlanta, Georgia area. Welcome to Dr. White.
Okay, so let's dive right into the conversations that we actually want to have today. We want to start out just by allowing each of our panelists to share a little bit about how you've been coping during this pandemic. What have you been seeing in the realm of work that you do? And what do you feel like is important for us to know and to be conscious of during this time as we all navigate through this pandemic together? We'll start with Robin McLeish.
Hi, good evening, not morning, good evening, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here. So, what have I been noticing during this pandemic within my practice? Oh, okay, all right. What have I been noticing? Well, one of the things that I've noticed an increase of anxiety amongst all of my clients, even those who felt confident in their way that they manage their anxiety. You know, with virtual learning, with concerns for their well-being that's going on with the pandemic, with loss of income, as well as other concerns going on. These are very unprecedented times. So a lot of my clients are experiencing increased anxiety because they're unable to plan for the future during this time. Another thing that I am noticing with a lot of my clients that are coming in during this year is that a lot of them are looking for a genuine connection, not only to themselves, but to a higher power. And what does that mean for them with their mental health? So those are some of the things that I have noticed, you know, and even for myself, how I cope during this time. Well, the first thing I do is I manage the amount of stress that I'm consuming, right? So I eliminate all unwanted stress, meaning I turn off news. Yes, I turn off CNN and make sure that I have time to focus on me. Like, self-care is important, you know, and another thing that I do is find time and space to feel my anxiety without judging it, feel it with compassion. And what do I mean with compassion? I basically mean that I see my anxiety through loving eyes without judging. And I take time just to feel it. And I also take time to show self-compassion to myself. And what does that mean? Is that I allow myself to breathe and rest. And I don't judge myself for it. So those are some things that I have done during this pandemic that has helped me cope with my anxiety. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that. We greatly appreciate that. Next, we will have Madam President Joyner, if you will share with us some of your experiences during this time.
Well, my life has just really changed a lot because I became president of the National Association in July. And it was at a time when there was racial injustice just going on and demands from everyone, people wanting to hear statements. And so what I found is that it was a very demanding time, and I had to partialize it. I had to really scale it back to what I could do in a day, because you can be on Zoom calls from 8 o'clock. I have one tomorrow at 8 o'clock, and you can go 24 hours, because I can be in Chicago 1 hour and then up in Massachusetts the next hour. And I realized, I was like, wow, if I was the president without COVID, I couldn't do all of that, because I would be flying to those places and I would have to say no. So I've had to learn to say no a little bit more than I would perhaps want to. Some people want you to fill in for their class and be there. And I just have to kind of peel that onion back. So I've noticed within myself, every morning I wake up and I'm like, oh my God, am I still in COVID? So I recognize the situation I'm in, and I do it every day, because every night I go to bed and I say, as COVID flew in here, I hope to God it flies out of here, because this is just not what I need to do. So being able to recognize my own feelings, and some mornings I'm up. If the sun is out, I'm generally up. And I have to recognize what the sun does to me. It is something. So I bought myself a little sun lamp that I shine on myself when it's raining, because I have to keep that energy alive. And then I just decide, what am I going to do during the day? Talking with people, there are a lot of people who are needy right now. A lot of organizations are going virtual. So being the president, they want me to speak there. And so I've decided to make a slide deck, and I decided to do a racial justice slide deck that I'm going to give to everybody. So it's not something where I feel as though I'm going to create so much work because I'm here, there, and everywhere. We're just going to focus. I'm focusing on voting, because that's something that I feel is really important. And so having a focus during the day, I make myself eat breakfast, because I think that that's a really important kickstart, to get something. It doesn't have to be good, even if it's just a banana or whatever. I make myself get dressed, because I find that getting up, getting dressed is really, really important, to not look like, whoa, what do you look like today? My husband and I decide which rooms we're going to be in, because we're generally not together. This is the longest we've been together. I've been married for 45 years. And this is the longest we've been together in those 45 years. Generally, someone's going to work or someone's going off, but we're here together. So he says, where are you going to be? Up, down. And we kind of keep those hours separated. And then I recognize when I've had enough, when I need that time out. I too turn off the television. I love music, so I turn on music and do my dancing around here, because I can. My husband dances better than I, but nobody knows it when you're there by yourself dancing. You think you're sliced bread. So I do those kind of things to give me energy. I need to do more in terms of, and we'll talk a little bit about this today, in terms of exercise. Some days it's too hot. Now I'm saying it's too cool. I had my dog died, unfortunately, last year, and he was my walker, right? So you get up and you'd walk the dog and you take the dog out. Without him here, I realized that that's a gap, and I'm going to either have to fill it with another dog. My husband's about ready to go crazy off of that, or just push myself, because exercise is important. Just like your physical health, where you go in and you check yourself out at the doctors, you have to do the same thing with your mental health. So that's me.
Absolutely. Thank you, that, and congratulations on your 45 years. And for our last panelist, Dr. White, will you share with us briefly some of the things that you've been experiencing during COVID?
Absolutely. Well, first, I have to echo the Sorors before all of that. I'm a full-time professor in counseling, and then I also have a private practice. So I have seen an increase in anxiety. And when we think about the really big picture, we've been through spring breaks, April Fools, Memorial Day, Juneteenth, 4th of July, Labor Day, birthdays, anniversaries, etc. With the constant state of, is this safe? Should I celebrate? So that's a lot of what I've been experiencing. People's birthdays, special moments have been overshadowed by COVID. And so we're constantly in this push and pull of what's next and when is this going to be over. Some of the things that I've done personally with students and clients is acknowledge what I can control. Things that I know for sure that Dr. White can control is the things that I put in my body. And that's not just food. So spiritually, what things am I listening to, whether it's music, people, gossip, not listening to the news or social media in general? That's a way of feeding your body. What do you control and how can I control it in a way that's going to move me forward? Mentally, what things am I going to feed my soul? And the biggest thing that was mentioned already that we'll get into a little bit deeper soon is self care and being really explicit and purposeful about our self care. Self care is a conscious effort you take to make and or relax your body. So some things that I've incorporated and encourage others to do is prayer a lot, journaling, exercise, sometimes just cutting off my phone for an hour or two. Again, that goes back to my spiritual health. If I'm not barraged with different text messages, memes, just social media news, reading a book, trying a new recipe, even trying a new hairstyle, saying no to others so that I can say yes to myself. So practicing boundaries are some other things, especially during this time.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Dr. White. Periodically, your volume goes down a little bit, so you may have to speak up just a little bit when you're responding. So we're going to dive right into some of the questions that we received that people really want to know during this pandemic and about mental health and well-being. And where I want to start with the panel is, how do positive support systems impact mental illnesses? How do positive support systems impact mental illnesses? And we will start with President Joyner.
Well, I think everyone has to have a support system. And you have to have a support system that listens. You know, there's some people you call, and as soon as you call them, they start talking and they're not listening. Or there's some people who call who you say, oh, you got that, and they minimize your feelings. It is important to have a system where you know you can call somebody and say, look, I just need to talk to somebody. And whether that's your therapist or whether that, and I mean, your therapist is you have to connect with your therapist. So many people go to therapy and they don't connect. And so I always say you need to shop and find the right one, so that it's like shoes, you find the right one that fits you. But you really have to have someone that you talk to. Again, why there's therapy dogs, because people talk to their animals. It's not so much listening and having somebody tell you what to do. It's being able to verbalize what you're feeling. And the more that you can verbalize that I just don't feel right today, or I need to do something different, I think the better off you are. People who are cut off, isolated, and alone, and who do not have a support system, they spiral down very fast, because they don't have the feedback to say that it's okay, and we're going to do this one day at a time, and that everybody is not perfect. And that's what I'm learning right now through COVID. I'm watching people become almost agoraphobic. They don't want to leave their house at all. No, I can't go outside. I'm like, you can go stand outside. It's important to get some fresh air. You don't have to go out there and clutter with other people, but it's important to go outside. Get your flowers, play in your mums, do whatever you need to do, but go outside, because when this is over, we're going to have a lot of people fearful of going outside. And so there's things that I think, being a social worker and working with people who've had mental illnesses, the ability to stay where that person is and help them get to that next step. And that's where a friend comes in, whether I'm going to sit in somebody's backyard. I have a friend right now, it's a friend and someone that I write with, and she just quit everything. And I text her to say, what's wrong? And she said, my depression. I have to control my depression. So I just send her a text you know, because she's way far away from where I am. You know, I sent her a text of a woman laughing, said, turn everything off and let's just laugh, right? There are things that you can do when you don't really have to talk to find out what happened, where did it happen, that kind of thing. But helping that person, just taking that person and start where that person is. And so I think a strong support system where you don't have to explain exactly what's going on is critical to anyone, especially in this day and time where you're seeing, I mean, I just had to fly to Atlanta for some business with my daughter. And of course, I'm on the plane, and you know, everybody's telling me, you know, when you go, oh, don't do this and wear this, and this. And I'm like, oh my God, that I didn't even want to tell people I was going because they were putting me under more stress, right? So, you know, my daughter and I, we go out and we go out to eat one night, and she was like, Mom, and I'm like, I know how to do this. We're going to sit in the corner with them. We're not going to get into where a whole lot of people are. So allowing people to understand that you got this, that you can still make decisions is important. So having a support group is great. People that don't have it spiral down. And those of us that are friends with people, now is the time when you check in with everybody. Now.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for
Mhm.
that. Next, we'll go to Dr. White with that same question.
Okay. So just really quickly, when it comes to supports and dealing with mental illness, it's essential. It's crucial. It's a non-negotiable because those of you who are spiritual, when you look at things like depression, it works very much like the devil. Its goal is to rob, steal, and kill any type of joy or self-confidence and reason. So when you have good people in your life, they can hold you accountable and they can help you think clearly and get the support that you need.
Awesome. And Robin, what about you?
Well, I believe that positive social supports are very important with our mental health. We are social beings and we need relationships in our lives for our own mental and physical health. You know, we cannot be alone. We have to be together. And having someone that you can talk to without worrying about what you're saying is going to be judged or not, having someone you could talk to and truly express your thoughts and feelings in a way that is healing for you is very important. Not only that, I find that relationships, they help in mirroring to us what we need to heal. So when we interact with positive relationships, they show us parts of ourselves that we need to work through, like depression or anxiety, and they help us get through that. So I do believe, just like the rest of the beautiful panelists that's on this call today, that positive support systems are very important with our mental health. It's one and the same. You cannot have a sound mental health without a positive support system.
Awesome. So, ladies and gentlemen, we hear it is crucial that we establish and utilize positive support systems. That is going to be critical in us all being able to come out of this together better. Next question, and this one will also be for all of our panelists because I think this one is going to be one that'll be pretty interesting. The question is, how does the superwoman complex play into mental health issues that women encounter? How does the superwoman complex play into mental health issues that women encounter? President Joyner.
So I'm just going to say that song, I'm Not Your Superwoman. There's no such thing as a superwoman. And for anyone to think that they are or to try to be that they are um, is 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 just being toxic, right? So my whole thing is you perfection only occurs when you go through those pearly gates, right? You know, once you go home, that's when you're going to have perfection. Otherwise, uh, something that we have to understand that it is okay to fail. The question that you had before about positive role models, you have to remove the toxic people, because a lot of people have toxic people that rely on them, and they want them to get, I told my husband that the day that I got married that my house can't love me back. So we had to get a cleaning person, because I had twins and there was no way that I could get out and go to work, take care of the twins, take care of him and all. So I just said, we need help. The house can't love me back. I like a clean house. So I'm turning this over. And for 45 years, I've turned it over, even though my kids are gone, right? There's just some things you need to know that work for you. And trying to do it all, trying to bring home the bacon, cook the bacon, cure the bacon, take the bacon grease outside. That's the old type um individual, right? And we just can't do it, and that is why people died early. That is why people died at 60, is because the stress of trying to do it all, you just can't do it. So if I could sing, I'd sing you that song right now. I'm not your superwoman, right?
Thank you so much for that. Robin, what about you in the Superwoman complex? What advice would you give us? Don't forget to unmute yourself.
Thank you. So when I think about a superwoman, I think about a person who is perfect, right? Everything they do it perfect, right? But perfection isn't real, right? It's just a goal. Perfection is something that we strive for. We're humans, and a superwoman isn't human. Humans make mistakes because we learn through mistakes. Success is a byproduct of our failures, right? So we have to learn to embrace our failures. We have to learn to accept trials and errors and growth from them. When we try to be perfect, when we try to be that superwoman, then we're not allowing ourselves to make those mistakes so that we can learn. When we do make those mistakes with the superwoman mentality, we shame ourselves. We hurt ourselves. We be very critical to ourselves because we're not living up to our expectations of what a superwoman should be. And that's not helping us. That's hurting us. And it's hurting everyone that's around us. So in my opinion, I feel like the superwoman complex is an ideal perspective, something that you should probably strive for, but don't think that you can be superwoman. You're human, and that's okay. That's perfectly fine.
So when it comes to the superwoman complex, I feel like the goal should be progress, not perfection. We're all striving to get better and do better, but it's a very, very personal journey, and it can't be based on anyone's expectations. And this is an amazing question that deserves a whole nother panel discussion, because women, especially women of color, have so much pressure on us. Like President Jordan mentioned earlier, we have people expecting us to act like the 1940s, where we're cooking and cleaning and on our knees doing X, Y, and Z. But we're also living in a world where prices and marriages don't look like the 1940s. So women are expected to work full-time jobs, rear children, and then cook like mama and them, and be cleaning and cooking all the time. And so knowing what works for you, whether it's getting help with meals, leaning on your mate for other things, is really important, especially for women, because we can be our biggest critics. We have society, and then also banding together and supporting each other. Going back to that previous question, you have to have support so that you can see things from a real world perspective and not idealize this kind of Sasha Fierce, Beyonce mentality. We can't always perform. We can't always be on the stage.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that response. So I have a question now, and I think we want to direct this question to Robin. Robin, especially in your experience with trauma-informed care, this question says, what impact does trauma have on mental health? How does resilience affect mental health?
That's a very good question. What does trauma have on mental health? So, man, that's a that's a loaded question. I could talk about that for hours. So let's see how I could break that one down. Okay, so, well, you know what? If it's okay, is it okay if I answer that question in the context of the pandemic? Is that okay with everyone, so that it can kind of help narrow that answer down? Okay.
Absolutely.
So with someone who may have experienced trauma prior to COVID and they're working through it, with COVID, this pandemic, it can enhance or re-trigger those traumas in a person. So for an example, if a person may have had anxiety in the past or trauma regarding being in a hospital of a chronic illness, then being in this pandemic will heighten that anxiety within them, even if they felt like they had control over it, because the way that our brain functions in a way where we are constantly looking for danger, right? That's the way our brains work. We're constantly looking for danger so that we can avoid it. And sometimes when we experience a trauma, our brain is expecting the trauma to reoccur. So we're constantly searching for those signals. So for someone who, for example, may have had chronic illness prior to COVID and they've gotten over it and they may have felt like they resolved it, well, during COVID, your brain is going to say, hey, when was the last time that you felt this way? Oh, it was when you experienced that trauma over at the hospital or when you were sick that one time. And now you're going to feel all of those emotions again. And you're going to be right back in that moment. And that's happening for hundreds, thousands, millions of people worldwide during this pandemic, And so we have to remember during this pandemic that even if we experience a trauma and we are working through it or we have resolved it, it can re-trigger during this time. And when that happens, self-care is most important. Mindfulness, taking deep breaths, finding time to yourself just to know that you are safe. Reground yourself to the present moment. These are all helpful to help you to cope through that triggering or flashback moment during this time. I hope that answered your question.
Awesome response. Thank you so much for that. President Joyner, this question is for you. How can families support persons diagnosed with mental illnesses? And that may include things such as resources that they can access and things of that nature.
It's important to recognize when someone in your family has a mental illness or is starting to spiral out of control. Uh, Again, family being a supportive family. There's some families who try to hide people's mental illness or ignore the fact that, oh, nothing's wrong with you. So it is important because not all families are very, in fact, a lot of people's mental stresses exacerbate through families because they feel as though they've got to be a certain way at home, or their family minimizes them, like, oh, go away, that kind of thing. What a family needs to do is to recognize that a person, all of the causative factors, if a person's on medication, has the person taken their medication? Does the person have their medication? Also, during the time of the year, there's some people who trigger at a time of the year when there's an event that happened and it happens at the same time. I know college students, sometimes going back, if they were not successful, they'll trigger at the time that school starts to open. And when that trigger happens, you have to take that person through the same support by helping them deal with their medications, deal with the incident. When you were talking earlier about triggers, even the trigger, I have someone that I know that I've been helping who they lost 6 people through COVID. Their aunt, their uncle, and they were themselves in foster care, and all of their loved ones died through COVID and they couldn't get there. And when they told me the first time of, because funerals now are you can zoom in to a funeral. And I said to the person, don't zoom into all those funerals. You just can't do that. Let's write a letter that you will have for that person that you can place at their headstone when it's time to be able to do that. Helping your family, and my family is just not my immediate family. I always call my friends my family. To be able to say, this is what you're going through. You've lost 6 significant people in your life in less than a year, and you have no way, you can't be there. When you talk about going to someone's services and going to the wake afterwards, where you're sitting down and you're eating and you're telling the stories, you're not able to do that. And there's part of your body that is just starting to trigger out of control. And to help that person realize what they're going through, give me a call. And to also, being that part of sending that person something and then saying to that person, you know what, I'm really, really going to help you find a therapist, because it's too much to handle. And that's what families do, is to let a person know, we're going to get you some help because it's too much to handle. And so I think families who are supportive, who believe, but just I cannot emphasize, and probably Robin can tell you, there's a lot of families who think it's a waste of time, it's a waste of money. I can't talk to somebody unless they're the same color as I am, age as I am, had the same experiences, because people use avoidance, right? And so when you use avoidance, means you don't want to talk about something. And so you have to realize some families can themselves be in avoidance. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much. And Dr. White, your question: can you provide recommendations on how to manage fears of stigma associated with mental illness, especially in the context of cultural and or religious conflict?
Absolutely. So it's so many layers of stigma when it comes to mental health. And so navigating that stigma, one of the simplest answers is having conversations. So mental health is very much a part of our medical health. So all of the panelists, as licensed clinicians, we are able to bill people's insurance because it's a legitimate medical health concern. And then education, a lot of what I do with my nonprofit is we talk about the difference between mental health and mental illness. And so being in a pandemic, almost everybody's going to have symptoms that looks like a generalized anxiety diagnosis. That doesn't necessarily mean they need to be on medication. Another stigma that comes out was actually mentioned in the chat by Ms. Price. You can have a spiritual base and still go see a therapist. That does not mean you lack faith. That does not mean that God has forsaken you. If you talk to a mental health provider, choose wise counsel is one of the things that's recommended by the Bible. So when I think about stigma and trying to destigmatize getting help and support, one of the things I usually tell people is just because you see a therapist doesn't necessarily mean you need medication. I know for people of color, that is one of the biggest fears. If I talk to somebody, I'm crazy. Then also in a lot of communities of color, we're told and socialized, and this unfortunately goes way back to before we had freedom, that we're not supposed to talk about what's going on in our house. Don't air out our dirty laundry. And that unfortunately perpetuates the question that was asked to Robin, that trauma. It's so many people that probably all of us have worked with who have been abused emotionally, physically, sexually at the hands of people who were family members. But again, that stigma of, if you talk about it, not only is it real, but you're also bringing shame upon our family. So conversations, more conversations like these, having good support, which sometimes will not look like your bloodline, and then doing research. There's tons and tons and tons of information, even in our local primary care physician, about mental health resources. I hope that's helpful.
Absolutely. That was an awesome response. All of you ladies have provided such phenomenal responses. And so what we're going to do right now is transition. One of the things that, is always helpful, it's great to have conversations, but a lot of times when I'm going someplace or I'm wanting to learn something, I want to be able to have something that I can take with me when I leave. And so at this time, each of our panelists has chosen one tip or trick that they are going to share with us so that we have something as we leave this call, we have some tips and tricks that we can possibly try or adapt to help us to better manage this chaotic time that we're in right now and to better help us to manage our mental well-being. And so we will start with Robin.
Okay. So there are multiple tips kind of popped into my head when you said that. So the one I think that would be a lot more easier to explain is basically what I call hacking your happiness, right? And so what is hacking your happiness? Well, hacking your happiness is bringing up a happy memory when you are feeling down or distressed, right? And how do you do that? Because a lot of people say, oh yeah, I've had happy experiences, but they don't know how to bring that back, right? How to recall that. So I teach my clients how to imprint happy moments. So you know those days when you wake up and it's just a beautiful day outside, right? Like the sun is just extra bright, the grass just seems extra green, it's just everything is perfect. Well, those are those memories that you want to imprint. Take that time to just be in that moment. Use your 5 senses. You know, recall how it smells. What do you smell around you? What do you see? Try to imprint some of that brightness, right? Like if the sun is extra bright, try to remember how that brightness looks. Try to remember what the feeling of it is, right? What you taste. Use all your senses, right? And just sit in it and feel the sensation that is in your body, that warmth, that lightness. Feel it and just take time to embrace it. Because what you're doing is you're imprinting this moment. So now, when you go ahead and you have a distressing time, like maybe you saw Lassie and Lassie died in the movie, and now you feel very sad and you want to cry, right? Well, after you cry, you can always hack that happiness by remembering that one memory and then feel it again. Using your 5 senses, re-feel exactly how you felt at that moment, right? And I believe that that's will help you overcome a lot of the stresses that you may go through throughout your time, especially during the COVID. And it's my way of hacking your happiness.
Wow, I love that. Hack your happiness. That is awesome. Thank you so much for that. Next, we'll have Dr. White. Share with us your tip or trick for being able to manage our mental wellness.
Absolutely. And so, as we've been talking, one of the things that's common is anxiety, feeling like we don't have control. And so, a lot of times, people, me, we go to what's for dinner, what's next, what we're doing tomorrow. So, one of the tips that I suggest is called a grounding technique. It's very similar to what Robin mentioned. When you ground yourself, you're focusing on being present. So, this is something I'm hopeful some of you guys will consider doing right now as I'm talking. As I'm talking, think about what your bottom feels like in your chair right now. Do you have on jeans? Do you have on shorts? Forget Dr. White on Be Adrian for a moment. I see everybody's cute from the waist up, but what do you have on? It's none of my business, but think about it. Like, how do your pants, your shorts, those leggings feel against your skin right now? Stop thinking about tomorrow. Think about this moment right now. Go down from your legs to your toes. Do you have shoes on? Do you have socks on? How does your big toe feel in those socks, those shoes? Or how does it feel against the carpet? Or do you have towel? How does it feel right now in this moment? Take your thoughts away from what's next and focus just on the sound of my voice and what your toes are doing. Wiggle that big toe, come back up to whatever's on your legs. If you have anything on, how does your skin feel in the clothes, the garments that you're wearing right now? How does your skin feel against your chair? How does your neck feel right now? Is it stiff? Is it loose? Being aware of your body. There's so many different mindfulness techniques that Robin mentioned earlier that we can do to bring us back in the moment. But I wanted to mention this one because I know a lot of us are Zoom meeting back to back and we're doing different things where we don't necessarily want people to watch us. Taking our conscious deep breaths, even though they are very helpful. But in the moment where you're sitting, nobody necessarily has to be aware of you wiggling your toes in your shoes. or you being able to feel how your socks feel, if you have some fuzzy slippers on, how they feel, or even you just being aware of what your body or even your neck is doing right now. So I hope that is helpful grounding techniques. You can even take a small stone or something smooth and rub it when you're in meetings that you think are going to be stressful, or you're talking with one of the kids about this online learning thing, or their teacher, or you're about to check an email that you think might be stressful. So back to what Robin said, with grounding techniques, you can take in some of your senses, especially feeling. What do you feel in your body? Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And our third tip, President Joyner.
Well, I'm a believer of taking time out and time out for fun. The more that you can laugh at yourself, the happier you can be. So what I tend to do in the every day is I schedule 15, 20 minutes of my own dance time where I turn on whatever music I want. And so I'm going to just put on something. I hope you can hear this. Hold on here. Can you hear that? Everybody get swinging. All right, so I want you to swing. I can see you if you're not swinging. Put your hands up. Put your hand up. All right, Sora Owens, I see you. Come on, get ahead. So, so what that does is it just gives you time out of whatever's happening in your day. Let me just see if I can get my music to stop. So what we have to do is celebrate ourselves. And our life can get busy, but very rarely do we take a book like this, because I journal a lot, and just put me time and go down, whether it's cha-chan or dancing with the banister. No matter what you're doing, is take some time. Oh, there's Sora Barron. Hey, take some time for yourself. Because if you don't do that, it's like gas in a car. If you don't fill up your own tank, you're going to run out. Right. And exercise is important, and especially during this COVID time, because some people just get up and they sit all day. They don't do anything. They're just sitting all day. So it's important that you just schedule that every day, and to make it a habit. You've got to schedule it over and over and over again. And I set my playlist up on Sunday. Sometimes it might just be listening to Marvin Gaye. Sometimes it's listening to some rap that's coming up, whatever it is. But wherever I go, I generally take my iPod. I don't take my phone, even though my phone has music on it. This I don't allow to ring. This is just me and my time. And I think and sometimes I even have to do it more when too much is going on, time out. And I do this with my grandsons, when they're 5 and 8 now. But we go time out and we just act silly and we laugh at each other. And when you laugh at each other, those endorphins start moving within yourself. And it's important to understand that laughter and smiling does have a physically, it helps your body. We all have this stress right now. You have the stress about worrying about racial injustice. You have the stress about worrying about paying for your bills. You have the stress about worrying about COVID. There's just, stress. There's just so much stress every day that if you don't take time out, your gas tank's going to be on empty. So that's what I do.
Awesome. I think that was so much fun, and you're absolutely right. You just kind of automatic energy and this joy that kind of happened as you heard that song. And so whatever your song is, whatever genre, it doesn't really matter. For some people, it may be gospel. For some people, it may be rock. You know, it could be whatever gets you going, whatever authentically makes you happy. And so that felt so good. And I hope that felt good for each of you.
I want to can I add one thing to that? There's a theory, it's called Edwin Nichols. He has a theory that kind of talks about people of color, especially African Americans. And we're member people. So we're rhythmic, you know, member people, no group is better than the other. There's member object, member great spirit. But we are member people, and what we do it has to feel right. You know how you talk to somebody, oh wow, that don't feel right, I got to go back and say something. Well, we are rhythmic, and Edwin Nichols, you can look it up, kind of talks about, we know through counting and through movement. And so going back to Africa, just listening to the music, I don't care what genre it is, people of color generally can get into any kind of music because we are rhythmic people. And so it is important to keep that rhythm in your life, because when it gets out of kilter, that's when we kind of spin out. I just wanted to add that. It comes from a theory.
Yes, absolutely. We appreciate that. And at this time, we do have a very special guest on the line with us. And I know she has another appointment in just a few minutes. So we wanted to give her the floor for just a couple of minutes to share with us. And that is the Southeastern Region Director, Dr. Celestine Levan. Dr. Levan.
Hello, everybody. This has been absolutely phenomenal, relevant, and timely. I want to thank our past director, Jakimba Martin, for putting this together. I know how important mental wellness is to her, and thank you for sharing your gifts. To our panelists, I took away a lot that I'm going to implement, such as mindfulness and saying no a little bit more, because I know just because I have the time to do something, I don't necessarily have to do that. So to my sorors, I won't take that out on you. I'll leave that at work. So for you, I'll say yes. For others, I'll say no. So again, thank you, sorors. I hope you took a lot away and that you implement some of these practices so that you could be a phenomenal woman, an even better soror, wife, and mother. So thank you so very much. And I'll hop off for my next call. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Levan. We so appreciate her time. We know that she is extremely busy, having just come out of that role. I understand it very well. So we're going to move on along. We had a couple of questions that were popped into the chat box, and we had one particularly in which it was a request for President Joyner to answer. So we're going to throw that question out for you, President Joyner, and hopefully you'll be able to provide a little bit of feedback for the questions. I'm going to roll back up to it.
And Robin's my other social worker on there, so you know you can always come. We studied together, right?
Absolutely. Anybody can jump in to help, but I know it was directed to President Joyner, but we know all of you all have expertise, so we're all about being able to help provide a complete answer. So the question was, I have a question. I have just escaped a narcissistic relationship. How can I heal and regroup successfully during this time? So a toxic relationship has been left. How does a person heal? How do you come back from that?
Okay, and I'm going to ask Dr. White to also team in with this. I believe when you're in a narcissistic relationship, you really do need someone other than yourself to help you so that you can start again. Because oftentimes what happens through narcissistic relationships, we fall right back into the same patterns. It becomes very easy to fall back into the same patterns. And, we know that people who are narcissistic has an ability to reframe themselves and retool themselves into a very nice person and say, oh, give me another chance. And before you know it, you are back with that person, and it even becomes deeper. And that is why we see so much happening with domestic violence. It takes 9 to 10 times to leave a person before a person really understands that I have to be out of here. So congratulations for recognizing, and let me just say that, congratulations, because you ended a relationship, and that is something that needs to be celebrated. But now the lonely part gets in, right? Because bizarre behavior brings with it its own energy. And sometimes we don't know the quiet moments of, my father always said, the best gift you can give yourself is learn to be alone, but not lonely. Learn to be alone, but not lonely. Because so many people have to fill up any kind of time with someone else, even if it's a toxic person. So I'm going to invite my 2 therapists that do this all the time and have clients that walk through the door to just kind of add on to that, because I do appreciate the fact that someone asked that question.
That's a very important question, and it's something that's not talked about enough. So, but those of you who don't know what a narcissistic personality disorder is, that is somebody they make it their business to basically gaslight you, to make you feel unworthy, to make a person feel like you have to be with them. And so it's a huge form of emotional abuse. So ditto, President Joyner, congratulations for getting out of that very toxic relationship. I put in the chat something that might be helpful for anybody, whether you've been with someone with any of the personality disorders, narcissistic, borderline. Borderline is somebody who's going to say, I'm going to kill myself if you leave me. That's another form of emotional abuse. I can't live without you. And so it's a workbook that I put in that's at Target. It's less than $15. It's called the Gaslighting Recovery Workbook. I do strongly recommend, if you've been in any type of emotional abusive relationship, that you seek therapy, that you find a licensed clinical social worker or licensed professional counselor managing family therapy. And President Joyner mentioned earlier, like, we all have preferences. Some people might want a therapist to pray for you. Some want someone who's non-religious. Some want somebody older, younger. Go on psychologytoday.com or Good Therapy. I'll put those in the chat. And you can see who takes your insurances, what issues they work with, but definitely see a therapist. And if you can get this workbook, that's a suggestion too, because when you deal with someone who has that diagnosis, your self-esteem can go straight to the gutter, because that is how they gain their power, by making people feel less than and belittled. Thank you for asking that question. That's a very powerful question, and it can help with people who've experienced emotional abuse or trauma in childhood as well.
Okay, so that was, like the other 2 panelists said, that was a very important question to ask. And thank you for asking that question. I've worked with a lot of clients who are escaping narcissistic relationships, and it's a process. It's the healing is not overnight. It is a process. And one of the things that I noticed with these particular clients is that they were mad at themselves for being in the relationship. They were mad at themselves for getting tricked into the relationship, right? And the healing part of it is forgiving yourself, telling yourself that it's not your fault. You weren't stupid for falling into the relationship, right? Understanding that the person who you were in a relationship with purposefully manipulated you into believing that there was someone that they were not. And that is not your fault. That is the fault of that person. You're not stupid for believing that person. You are human for believing that person, right? Goes right back to that superwoman, right? We are not super women. We are social beings, and we need connections. And when someone tells us something that we connect with, of course we're going to go to them and we're going to open up to them. We don't expect them to hurt us. And that's why it's not our fault. It is their fault, because they knew from the very beginning what was going on. So for me, I believe that along with what my other beautiful panelists said, I want to add forgive yourself, because that's important.
Wow, those were all very, very powerful responses. Thank you all so much for those responses. So we had a couple of other questions. What recommendations do you have for how to access mental health resources within someone's community? And this is critical now more than ever with the pandemic going on, with people struggling to be able to afford, their care and things of that nature. So how do we find how to access those resources, whether it's for ourselves or for loved ones? And anyone that wants to take that.
So there's two options. If you have health insurance, most because of the pandemic, many insurance providers are waiving the copays, and different therapists are offering sliding scales and discounted rates for therapy. However, if you're trying to care for a family member or even yourself and you have no insurance whatsoever, look for your local community service board. And I'll also throw that in the chat. And they usually have either free therapy or therapy on a sliding scale. I mean, phenomenal fees like $5. And another thing that Sora Angela mentioned is your employer might have an employee assistance program, and that's a free benefit. They pay this money up front every year because honestly, employers' goal is to get you back to work. So if they're able to get counseling at a discounted rate, knowing that as human beings, social beings, we're going to have good things that cause stress, promotions, marriages, and not so great things that cause stress, divorce, death. And so you can get counseling for free. You would have to follow up with your human resources department and see if they offer what we call employee assistance program. And that's a set of 5 to I think 12 is the most I've seen through like Coca-Cola, where you can get sessions for free. Those are some options.
Yes, and I would add to that, ask your friends. You'd be surprised how many people have therapists. And I would say interview your therapist. Just don't take a therapist, interview your therapist and have a specific list of questions that you would ask them. Now through telehealth and, there's so many things now that people are able to do, therapy right on the phone these days. I mean, it's been waived by the insurance companies. And so they're allowing people now to just practice with you looking at me and me talking to you without having to literally go into someone's place of practice. Sometimes people like that. They like to get away from their home because some of the issues are about home. So think about what your needs are. If Google, I mean, you can Google and find all kind of therapists and web pages. There are a lot there. But what I say, you have to interview and ask some friends, who do you use? Do you know someone? And all of a sudden you're going to hear somebody say, oh, and you're going to realize how many people use therapists. Just make sure that they have their degree. Okay, so the one thing that we do know is sometimes, and I'm not saying that they're good, bad, or indifferent, but life coach. Some people just all of a sudden they're going to be a life coach. And I was working out one day, and the person that I was working out with, he said, I'm getting ready to be a life coach. And I'm like, a life coach? How are you going to be a life coach? Oh, I'm going to go take. So you really want to know where a person learned, what they studied, and how they practice. So just don't take the first person you see, interview people, and people respect that. I mean, I respect people that would call up and say, because I tell people, I don't do that anymore. Been there, done that, because every time, you don't realize how stressful it is to take on someone else's issues, right? And I worked in children and youth and work with parents who abuse kids, and it was something that I enjoyed doing, helping people parent better. But then there came a part of my life when I wanted to come home, and I just said, that's enough. I went out and did consulting and help people learn how to do this thing. And so you don't want an old tired therapist. You want someone that is in it and enjoys being there. I watch my daughter with her clients, and I just marvel. I always say, oh, wow, one right after another. Because the one thing that I always would say to a therapist was, who do you see? And I'll say that again, who do you see? Because a therapist has to talk to someone else about all the cases that they have to help get fine-tuned. And sometimes when they're just dealing with it with themselves. And right now in the land of Zoom, you know, you might see people's kids behind them and the therapist's kids behind them. And I learned adapt, because that's the way life is right now, right? Nobody is going to be able, and if that doesn't suit you, then move on. But some therapists, their kids are home, so they have to be home with their kids. So it is just a lot of things that are different right now. But I love this time, because this time I'm not a believer of resiliency. And that's not because I don't believe that people are resilient, but I believe that not everybody can be resilient. And so sometimes when you can't be resilient, people think that something's wrong with them. So, you know, Brene Brown gives a lot about resiliency and how to be resilient, but there are some people's life circumstances does not allow them to be resilient, and they can't be beat up for that. But it's a good time right now, because I do believe that survival is within us all. And we're learning new ways of doing things that we never, I mean, who would have ever thought they could have been in from March till now and be okay? Who would have ever thought the parents could be home? And I marvel at the parents that are doing this, that are doing all of these things at home with their kids. What we're not doing, and what I say to people is celebrate these milestones, because we're sitting here saying, wow, this waiting for, there's a lady that told me, death gotta find me. If you stay in the same place twice, death's gonna come along and take you. So what you need to be able to do is mix it up and celebrate yourself, that you are surviving during these difficult times.
Yes, and I just want to also add to that for other recommendations within your community, you can also call 211. I know when I used to work at the hospital as a social worker, we social workers have a lot of resources at the hospital. We have to have resources for our clients that comes in, for the patients. When they leave, we have to give them resources. So I would sometimes tell clients, go if you have a local hospital, go and ask them. Go and just walk in and say, hey, can I speak to your social worker? Because they all have social workers. So can I speak to your social worker? And they can go and they can give you resources. No additional questions, right? Another thing that you can do, and I love it, Google, because there's a lot of free resources on Google. It's amazing what Google knows. I wish I had Google when I was younger. It's amazing. Like, I think I Googled the other day therapy, and there was actually a resource where you can get free therapy online. So Google, that's your best friend. And just like what Soror Joyner, Soror White says, is talk to somebody, right? Because people know. A lot of my clients I've gotten because of referral from other clients, because they're talking about their problems. And when they talk about their problems, people are going to refer you, because let's be honest, none of us want our loved ones to be hurt. So if someone comes to us and they tell us that they're hurting, we're going to do everything within our abilities to help them. So if we know a therapist, if we have a friend who has a friend who has a friend who's seen a therapist, we're gonna do the channel. So talk about it with a friend. Don't keep it in. Silence is not gonna help you. Go out, talk, seek answers, Google, call 211, go to hospitals. You know, there's a lot of ways to get resources. There's a lot of resources out there. There truly is. You just have to seek it.
Awesome. Thank you all for those resource availabilities. And as we prepare to bring this time to a close, one final question. And that question is, what do you see as barriers to people accessing services, and how do you address concerns that people have about confidentiality? You know, we all have that fear. You know, we don't want people to know our business. You know, we don't want people to know we're seeing a therapist. We think that, you know, they may perceive us differently. We also know that we've had this discussion, this huge discussion, especially over the last several months, about equity or inequity. So what do you perceive, number one, as barriers to people even being able to access the services? And then number two, how do we address the concerns they have about confidentiality, even going in there because they're afraid that their information may not be as secure as they would like it to be?
Well, if it isn't secure, you can sue them because you know, we are bound by confidentiality. Even making sure that people don't even see each other. You know, one door in, another door out, that kind of thing. So unless, you know, even when you're shopping and you would see a client, you can't really recognize your client unless they recognize you. So it will be confidential, you know, as long as you want it to be confidential. No one, you know, I think that we all carry liability insurance, and that's one of the reasons why, is to make sure all of us have a code of ethics, and confidentiality is our code of ethics. So we can't really even tell your spouse that you are coming to see us, or we can't really testify in court unless we're subpoenaed, and then that question has to be answered. Unless you are really going to hurt yourself or hurt someone else, we can't violate that, your confidentiality, in court. So you know, the one thing that I would say is, if you have children and your children need to see someone, and then of course we're with HIPAA, and there are times when, you know, we don't necessarily, with teenagers, disclose to their parents exactly what that child is saying, but you know, there's those actual borders on that. You know, the one thing that I have to say right now, and I want to say in closing, because I know we're getting ready to do that, is do watch your children. I just said on a call where 6-year-old killed himself. So suicide is very, very high right now, especially in African American young men and young boys. And so you know, it is important for us to always tune in, not only to our own mental health, but to the mental health of everyone around us. You know, I didn't grow up too much with bullying. Bullying was, you literally went outside and threw your books down and fought someone. Now it is completely different, and a lot of kids are carrying a lot of heavy problems and issues. And suicide, you know, is up in the military, it's up in the homes, it's up everywhere. So you know, do know that right now this is a serious time, but confidentiality. And Robin and Adrian, I would love to hear whether you feel the same way about where people are right now.
So I agree with you. Definitely confidentiality is very important for our practice. We are bound by our board for confidentiality. It is so important to us. You know, confidentiality is important for our therapeutic relationship. That's why it's so bound. And if you believe that what you're saying to us, we're going to share it with everyone else, then you wouldn't share it with us, and then you wouldn't be able to heal. So this is why we have such a strict law when it comes to confidentiality. Even with my clients, just to give them a sense of control, because having a sense of control is important. And just to give them a sense of control, I give them the numbers to how to report me if they believe that I have breached confidentiality, you know. And so that's very important. Some of the barriers that I see with people coming for therapy, the biggest one I see is with men. A lot of men will come in, and it's like they don't want to feel, because they believe that feeling is a sign of weakness. And so a lot of times our pre-beliefs that emotions is a sign of weakness, or believing that if you see someone that you're crazy, if you talk to someone, you're the problem. All of these are barriers. These are not true. Like I said before, we are social beings. We're intended to talk. We're meant to express ourselves, right? So I like to tell my clients that when they come to see me, I'm not exactly a shrink sitting in a chair. I'm like you. I'm here just talking to you, listening to you, and just providing insight, you know, and hopefully you can resonate with that insight. You can resonate with that. And that alone helps a lot of my clients overcome those beliefs that feeling is a sign of weakness. I shouldn't feel. Anger is bad. Sadness is bad. Anxiety needs to be rid of. So these are the barriers, and those are how I help to overcome those.
Awesome.
Oh.
Go ahead. Go
Well,
ahead, Dr. White.
I put most of my answer in the chat. I think the barrier is choosing the right therapist. A lot of people watch The Sopranos or different shows and think that, especially I know personally, I have people thinking that I'm going to Ayana fix their life. And as President Jorna mentioned earlier, is a very distinct difference between what licensed professionals do, like the women on the panel, and our beloved Ayana Van Sant, who is technically a life coach. And so we're legally bound to protect your confidentiality with a few exceptions. And so it's a lot of time, money, and effort to go into licensure. And to my knowledge, none of us wants to lose our license. So we wouldn't be breaking your confidentiality, nor would any of the licensed people you seek out to get the help that you need. I just think it's really important that people know that they're empowered in the counseling process. They get to interview and choose their therapist. I'm sure the other sorors can relate. A lot of times we've been the cleanup women for therapy, where people have been the therapists who just weren't a good fit for them, and it actually can make your symptoms worse. So knowing that you're empowered in that process, educating yourself on insurance or resources 211, the links that we put in there, and talking to each other. It's still, unfortunately, a lot of shame and stigma around mental health, but everybody on this call knows at least one person who either is a therapist or have seen a therapist. 80% of my business is referrals. So people are saying, hey, I got help at Dr. White Therapy Group. You should go too. So communication, education, and empowerment.
Absolutely. Phenomenal responses. And so as we close, I would ask each of our panelists to just share some closing word of encouragement that you have for the community and for us, how about ourselves, about how we help others, just and how we get through all of this as we navigate this pandemic.
Well, I'm just going to say that it is my privilege and honor to be here. I was glad to be invited, and to know that the sorority is doing this. I mean, so many of the things that we do, like swimming, that's an exercise. A lot of the things that we do, this group of women is your support. And don't ever let that down. I mean, that's why you pledged, was to be part of a group, no matter where you are, and you see these colors or even colors that belong to someone else. You know that you have a shared journey, and so it's important to always remember that, and that you can continue to soar. Right now, all of my efforts is in voting. You talk about a narcissistic being, that's Donald Trump to me. And to know what he will do or is doing with African Americans, just having the insight that I do as president of the association, and going on the Hill and talking with senators and understanding a lot of the legislation that has been blocked, the impact of what's going to happen. I mean, I know that I'm Roman Catholic, but I believe that women have the right to make their own life decisions. I know it's going to get worse. I know that healthcare might be taken away from people on November the 10th. I know that what we were talking about, the therapy, your people that you work for will pay, is on the brink. The one thing that we have from our ancestors is that we stood on the shoulders of people, of Sojourner Truths, of Harriet Tubmans, of people who had no hope whatsoever, and they survived. And so with that, I want you to remember to stay connected. I always say you can be physically distant, but socially connected. We are human beings. We need human relationships. We need purpose. And so I'm going to ask you to join me on this purpose to beat the trail on or before November the 3rd to get out the vote. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
The only thing I want you guys to take away is just you being on this call means that you're a part of change. Be open and willing to have conversations about mental health and mental wellness with your family members, friends, and coworkers. Thank you guys so much for coming and listening and your amazing questions.
And What I would like to share is that you are the most important person in your life. Without you, your life wouldn't be lit. So you are the most important person. So it's okay to take care of you first before you take care of other people. That is perfectly okay. Actually, it's actually recommended. It's perfectly sound, you know. So that's my advice. Take care of yourself first. Yes, vote. I am a big, big supporter of voting. You know, we have a voice and it's our right to go, and not even just our right, it's our duty, actually, our civil duty to vote. And as adults, that's our responsibility. You know, we have to vote for what is our best interest. And if we don't vote, then someone else is going to vote on our best interest. And who knows what's best for you other than you? So therefore, you need to vote. I definitely agree with that. Thank you for listening to me and allowing me to share my passion and my knowledge with you guys. This was truly a privilege and an honor. Thank you guys so much.
Well, thank you all, each and every one. We greatly appreciate your time and your energy that you invested in being here with us for this important conversation. And we know that this is just a beginning. We know that this week is Mental Illness Awareness Week, and so we will be celebrating and having awareness activities throughout the week. You'll see a lot of social media campaigns. I put up the flyer for those of you who are interested. We'll have quotes and questions throughout the week where we'll be do empowerment quotes. We'll be asking mental health questions, just kind of have a little interactivity to make sure that we are aware and we keep this on the forefront because it is such an important topic, especially in our communities. We know that on Saturday is World Mental Health Day, and so we know that the Second Grand has her initiative, so we ask that you support that initiative. You'll be seeing a lot of different things, and so we're extremely excited. On November the 4th, that is International Stress Awareness Day. And so we are asking that you all take some of this information that we've learned on this call tonight, some of these tips and tricks, and that you actually do something for yourself on that day. We're asking you to make that pledge and make that commitment to yourself. And when you do, take a picture of it and post it for us and let us know that you took the day on November the 4th. You took just, whether it's 5 minutes, whether it's an hour, whether it's the whole day, you took some time for you as the valuable and the worthy person that you are, and post that. Use our hashtags, hashtag mental health matters, hashtag SG Road Mental Health, and hashtag mental health no cap, because we want to be able to have open and honest conversations so that we can stop the stigma and so that we make sure that our communities are okay and that our communities continue to thrive, not just to exist, not just to survive, but to thrive so that we can continue building our legacies. So thank you for joining the call tonight. We thank all of our moderators. We thank our tech team that helped us. We thank those who are on Facebook Live watching us as well. We heard that one over very well as well. So thank you for your time. Take care of yourself. We love you and know that you are valuable and you are worthy. And we will see you next time. Have a great evening, everyone. Good night.